Nizeyimana. Now, he is the CEO of SSCG Consulting, the African Business Chamber, and Director of One Africa Network and NPI Lifecycle Management Consultant for Caterpillar. He's an entrepreneurial engineer and international management consultant with over 20 years of experience. He's also served in various private and public capacities, including in international oil companies, Innovate the UK, Society of Petroleum Engineers, GTC Energy, NHS Institute of Innovation, and Automotive OEMs such as Jaguar and BMW. He's a mentor for the Africa Women Entrepreneurship Cooperative Bloomberg program at the Center for Global Enterprise in New York. He also sits on several boards, such as the Business Advisory Panel at Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority and the Digital Inclusion Taskforce at Greater Manchester Combined Authority, and is a member of the Mckinsey Automotive and Assembly and Institute of Directors. I wonder how he's got time to actually be here today, but he is. He is. So he is our second keynote speaker. The address title is Globalization and Africa's Self-Sustaining Agenda. Please welcome Mr. Eugene Nizeyimana to the stage.
Great to be here and nice to see my fellow African and diaspora. Hope you can hear me. I got a call, so I'll try to try and maintain the momentum. So my name is Eugene, as introduced. I've been given a very challenging topic, but I'm just going to try and go through it very quickly, give an overview in terms of the current African economic context, just to refresh ourselves. I'm sure some of the things I'm going to go through has been highlighted or you're fully aware of it, and then give my thoughts in terms of how can we set Africa to self-sustain itself. So a bit of introduction. My introduction has made easier because I'm from Rwanda, and Rwanda has been mentioned a couple of times in the previous, in a good way, of course, some of the examples that has been highlighted. And I do partly agree with some of the previous speaker perspective, but I also want to bring a challenge to say Africa, we have not lost hope in terms of the leadership 100%. We still have some few leaders who are doing well. Of course, my president, Paul Kagame, has been doing a few amazing things which has been highlighted, so we can maybe draw back some of those things. And there's also other leaders like Senegal president and a few other presidents who are doing amazing things that we can actually, so we can't say we've lost hope 100%. There's a few left over that we can pick up from. So I'm from Rwanda, of course. I've been here for a couple of 20 years, but I go in and out. I lead a few organizations, African Business Chamber, which is an economic development organization. We work with the UK government, DIT, UK Export Finance, government organization, both in the UK, looking at economic development, recovery, bouncing back, and also championing investment, economic activity between UK and Africa. But we picked a different angle where also we are engaging the diasporas. So we have a pool of hundreds of businesses we are working with in the UK and Africa, in addition, of course, with UK companies and other. One Africa Network is an organization that we set up 5 years ago. It's a network of African leaders, entrepreneurs, innovators. In the UK, we have around 5,000 members. We are supported by Innovate UK, looking at innovation, technology advancement, entrepreneurship, creativity, minority in the STEM industry, to look at ways we can empower African diaspora minority to thrive in the economy. Thirdly, of course, SSG is one of our private consulting firm, is a strategy consulting firm that we set up when we were in Oxford. Originally it was called Sub-Saharan Consulting Group. So we narrowed it down to SSG. We are a technology economic development consulting firm that we work with various engineering companies and technology businesses in the UK and Africa. So I've worked around 20 countries in Africa, which has given me the opportunity to appreciate African context, the market, the challenges, the opportunities, the landscape, and the diverse culture. I've also worked around 10 countries in Europe, which also has given me an opportunity to assess Africa from a different angle or perspective away from the actual context. So that gave me an opportunity to look Africa in both directions. So in terms of course, coming from Rwanda, Rwanda was involved in a disastrous genocide, civil war 28 years ago from now. And I have hope that Africa, we can re-emerge. Rwanda, we had totally failed. We were involved in a very disastrous war, and then 1 year later, we were involved in Great Region War with Congo, which drew lots of countries in it. 3 years later, we were involved in another regional war, Zimbabwe, Angola, every country in Africa was involved, American, British, Russian, everybody. So it was a disastrous decade. But we moved on. At some point, we decided to reconcile with ourselves. We said we can't fight forever. We need to set a new path. And that is good to hear and see some of the amazing story coming from Rwanda, considering where we came from. So Africa, we have hope, of course. We are not a hopeless continent. And I know Economic magazine 10 years ago was publishing Africa, the hopeless continent, and then 10 years later, the rising continent. I think that narrative has changed now. I don't know where we are. So, but there's hope. So in terms of, before I go into to share my perspective, I want to give an overview in terms of African economy amid of ongoing and new economic shocks. Some of these probably are fully aware in terms of Africa remain undiminished and in the current situation, of course, home to 1.4 billion population, 70% under 30. I know the youth has been mentioned quite a lot in the last discussion. And it's projected by 2050, a quarter of the world population will be African. Second, of course, home to 55 countries and the largest trade area, Africa Free Trade Continental Area, which is creating a lot of excitement to stimulate regional trade and the inwards collaboration rather than export outwards. Other things, of course, estimated collective GDP of 2.6 trillion, modest average GDP growth last year of 3.7 in 2021, projected to be around 3.6 in 2022. Hopefully we'll achieve it. Boast some of the diverse rare earth minerals and resources, 60% of unused arable land, best coastline for tourism and visitor economy, Leon sunshine for renewable energy. So quite a lot of opportunity to untap into. Furthermore, of course, Africa was slowly recovering from COVID-19 recession, but now has been affected by UK-Russia war, affecting the supply and disruption, fertilizers, food shortages, and these are some of the things that we are seeing now impacting the African economy at the moment. Talk about Northern Africa that depend on 40% of wheat coming from Ukraine and China, while we have arable land locally that we could use to do better farming. So we need to look at this, and these are the key things that are helping us to rethink about the African position in the global landscape. Also booming sector, some of the sectors we are seeing, healthcare, of course, driven by COVID, has called into question the healthcare system in Africa and calling more investment into health. Health economy require health people. So we need to invest more into our people and well-being. Agribusiness, of course, food security, sustainable energy, technology transformation in the continent is growing fast. We're seeing now emerging new unicorns from Nigeria, South Africa, Kenya, Egypt. So technology disruption is bringing a new opportunities and take us into a new landscape. Of course, infrastructure and real estate. So these are some of the trends. Of course, there is more, but I thought I'd give you an overview where we are in terms of the Africa economy and the landscape. So talking about emerging, I just want to expand the scope. I think we shouldn't be talking about Africa emerging in Africa only. Africa needs to emerge in the global economy. So we live in a globalized economy. We need to look at Africa emerging in Africa and Africa emerging in other areas. Talking about in the UK, you still have our diasporas fighting for inclusion. We still have African participating in other economic development in the US, World Bank, and whatever. But we're still fighting for our own representation. Africa, we still don't have representation in the permanent members. WTO, Africa is only represented 3%. We're still fighting for representation. So we can't emerge only in Africa. We need to emerge in globally. That's where we'll get better representation, because we live in a globalized society. So in terms of how the globalization is impacting African economy, of course, globalization has provided several opportunities for Africa to develop and leapfrog out of poverty. Some of the key things that we're seeing, some of the trend and opportunities, of course, great access to global market, African solution, expand into the global, of course. Likewise, we're seeing a lot of international companies expanding their footprint in African region. Increased cultural awareness. I'm sure most of you have seen, I can see quite a lot of well-dressed women here into African fabric. So we're seeing a lot of African fabric being appreciated, now being taken on by global fashion companies, Gucci and all those. We're also seeing a lot of music. I'm sure you know some of the Nigerians who have been receiving global awards and all those. BBC these days, you can hear a lot of African music, culture, sport, of course, Premier League. We know a lot of African players in movies. Now we're seeing growing number of Nigerian movies being streamed on Netflix and all those. So we are not emerging locally, we are emerging the global landscape on a practical level. Other things, of course, we're seeing investment driven in Africa to support untapped and underserved market. Increased global trading, sharing of knowledge. So I'm doing a lot of work with the UK government under the DIT, UK Export Finance, Innovate UK, looking at ways we can drive innovation and all those things, and to make sure that we share knowledge. Standardization of African product to meet global quality and also to support export. Deepening of trade, increased internet connectivity has created a great opportunity to connect across the world. Ease of travel connectivity. These days you can easily connect across the world because of the connectivity. I've got a few minutes left. So the challenges, of course, globalization has brought a few challenges. Some of them are foreign workers exploitation. We're seeing labor movement from Africa to the West, which is creating a lot of brain drain and skill shortages, especially during COVID, a lot of doctors. To give you a good example, we have more Malawian doctors in the UK than in Malawi itself. So this is recently we saw a lot of doctors migrating, hundreds of them from Nigeria, Kenya, coming to the West. That has created a huge gap. We need to address that. Of course, Africa is disadvantaged when it comes to commodity trading. The case of cocoa, we all know it. I'm sure you've come across it. Global competition and the flooding of low-cost products from China, other markets are affecting local product and indigenous industries. We're seeing a lot of unused Western product being exported in Africa, creating a lot of environmental challenges. A good example, Rwanda decided to support import of used clothes from US. US decided to threaten Rwanda to remove out of AGOA, but the president had agreed, okay, for the better of the future of the country, we'll move forward. So now most of the clothes being sold in Rwanda and manufactured locally, which is a great opportunity to empower local textile industry than keep receiving. So some of the examples. So in terms of setting Africa to transcend itself for a better future. Here are some of the examples, of course. We need to take the responsibilities and to address our challenges. Every time Africa has issues, we're always looking towards the West to solve our problem. We need to solve our own problem, starting by ourselves. African government need to put certain basics in practice and certain infrastructure, security, some of the things we talked about, good governance, robust institutions, public debt. Nobody talk about it much about public debt. Selfless leadership. Leadership, I've been told quite a lot of times. We need to invest in healthcare infrastructure. COVID, of course, has called into question about vaccine equity. We all know it, and everyone to themselves. So Africa needs to look into that. Create jobs and opportunity for the youth. 70% of the population, I know the youth has been talked quite a lot, and you have a lot of huge group of youth around here. So we need to create a lot of opportunity for the youth. I have not mentioned about education because in Africa we have a huge population of educated people who doesn't have jobs. They made a joke that in Africa you study and you graduate, you forgot what you studied before you find a job. So we need to create jobs for the educated one and continue educating without creating an opportunity for them. We need to empower and bring more women into labor force. I know my previous colleague mentioned about it. Men are the root cause of the problem. I have a solution. So women empowerment, and Rwanda has done a good example. We have 60% of the parliament are women. We are doing quite amazing work in terms of women empowerment in Rwanda. And some of the work I've been doing mentoring women. Each year we mentor around 200 businesses, African women, to support them and empower them to create their own business and thrive. Move up, of course, value chain to make sure we support local processing and manufacturing rather than exporting raw materials. So we're seeing a lot of countries changing their policy. Botswana changed their policy to process diamond locally. Before COVID, I was involved in a government program in Tanzania to stop export of cashew nut, to process everything locally rather than exporting to India, Vietnam, which created a lot of opportunities locally. So we need to harness those. Rwanda currently now processing some of the mine gold minerals locally and then export end product. So we need to transfer some of this, like in Nigeria, we are seeing 100% of export of petroleum and import of at a higher price. It's not very sustainable. We've talked about sustainable economic growth. So we need to address infrastructure deficit, negotiate better deals and engagement in terms of how Africa engage with the world, focus on inward trading than outwards to create more opportunities locally, accelerate digital transformation. I mentioned earlier on, we're seeing a lot of transformation driven by digital agenda and all. Harness inclusive economic growth. Yes. So, in conclusion, to sustain itself, Africa, we need to drive growth in many ways. Of course, countries will face some headwinds, challenges and vulnerability. So we need to build resilience and assertiveness to respond better. Let's not be imposed to take other people's agenda or to decide where we position ourselves about Ukraine, or we need to look our interests first, local interests, local population. Second, of course, make up for lost ground for COVID, so unlock opportunities and drive efficiency and effectiveness. I know COVID has taught a lot. We can learn better. I don't need to travel to Nigeria anymore or beat traffic. I can meet you on Zoom and be more efficient and all that. So we must learn and take advantage of current economic trend and disruption. COVID, Brexit, now Ukrainian has exposed a lot in terms of supply chain. Dependency on China, dependency on Ukraine for grain or sunflower oil. When we have Arab land locally, we can farm, we have everything. We just need to take technology. Finally, harness and prepare Africa for rapid economic and social change to give the continent a better role in the world, global affairs and economy. So I hope that gives you an overview in terms of how we can shape Africa for a better future. But I welcome any question. Thank you.